Welcome back to our science-based solutions for anxiety course. In this video, we're going to be delving into the topic of functional neurology and different science-based solutions that you can even do at home to help reduce anxiety and get to the root causes, give you some relief. Dr. Kuykendall, thank you so much for joining me. So can you talk about, what is functional neurology? What does that mean? And what benefit does that offer to kind of have that as part of your approach to anxiety and health?
Absolutely. Yeah, functional neurology, when I found out about it, was one of the most exciting things at the time for me. I mean, it's still very exciting, but I've been doing this a long time now. So functional neurology is, first you have to recognize that the body is a bioelectric, a system, right? And so your heart beats on this bioelectricity, and through that electrical production, allows us to pump, roughly 40,000 gallons of blood through our body every day. And so with that electrical production, you also have all the electrical wiring that runs out of the 7 cervical vertebrae and the thoracic and the 5 lumbar vertebrae. And each one of these little electrical wiring systems runs to different objects in your house, just like your circuit breaker runs to different electrical appliances. One runs the toaster, one runs the oven, one runs the lights in the bathroom, right? And so somebody that's trained in this, specifically chiropractic world, they are basically kind of body electricians looking for where the circuit breaker is off. If the lights are off in the kitchen, you would have somebody say, well, it's the circuit breaker, or it's this wiring that's going on, so we need to affect that. So chiropractic is powerful in and of itself, thank goodness for it, because what they're doing is finding the circuit breaker that's out of position very gently and putting it back into position. There's many, many modalities to do that. Now, functional neurology, so chiropractic, when they're moving or adjusting a vertebrae in the body, whether it's a cervical or a thoracic or a lumbar, they are finding that people have less pain, less inflammation, they heal faster, their headache goes away, but they also find that they don't have as much gastrointestinal stress, they have better sleep, they have better sex drives, they have all of these types of symptoms that improve that sound like snake oil. And the reason it's not snake oil is because you're a bioelectrical system. And so whichever one of these little 24 of the vertebrae, right, that are in the spine, if there's any of these servos, they're kind of like servos, they're click, 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 click. If you move and you can move properly, then all of them are being affected. But if you can't move them properly, whether you feel pain or not, and that's a really good distinction, what happens is you're not getting that electrical circuit firing to the heart or the lungs or your sex glands or organs or your glands of your body, right? And so we go through and we move the little vertebrae very gently with the different types of modalities, and we find, wow, geez, a lot of things are better. Now, functional neurology is where we break it down much further, right? And so neurology obviously comes out of the medical world. It comes out of the allopathic world with the medical doctors and the white jackets and all that stuff. I used to wear one of those, but it didn't fit me. I just was like, I don't really need this anymore. This is like a suit or a cape that my ego, I can set this down, right? I don't need that identity. But let's utilize all of the studies that I've been doing and the work that I've been doing over the years and all of the natural medicine and utilizing the best in the allopathic medical world, and let's combine them. So what functional medicine is looking at the body and the brain as a whole, right? So, for example, where say somebody has Bell's palsy and their face is just hanging off the side here. Well, the facial nerves, or I should say the 12 cranial nerves that control this side of the face, are mostly coming from the contralateral or opposite side of the brain, the opposite cortex, right? The nerves run out of the brain through these little foramen, right? And then innervate or connect to your olfactory bulb, which is the ability to smell. This is literally the wiring, just like in your house. The ability to move your eyes or smile on your face or even feel sensation. Like the act of a baby when they're doing like sucking, and on your finger or anything, they call it rooting reflex. So when the mom brings the breast up, the baby knows to turn. I mean, it's called a primitive reflex. If you put something in a baby's hand or a chimpanzee's hand, it does this. It's called grasp reflex, right? And so these are natural reflexes, and they're all controlled by different aspects of the brain, contralaterally mainly, but also the cranial nerves, right? And so if we want to affect this part of the face, you know, if you go to a medical doctor with this issue, they're typically going to say, well, these are the causes of why you have Bell's palsy, which is the facial. And this is just an example to make it simple for people. Well, you know, going from hot to cold can do it. A trauma to the face can do it. Infection or virus of the trigeminal nerves of the face can cause this issue. So, you know, good luck. You know, some of these improve, some of them don't, you know, and that's usually because all they have when they open up that box of tricks, right, when they got that bag from medical school, it's either a knife or a drug is the primary standard of care. Now, there is wonderful medical community out there that are specialized, but I have not met any that are doing functional neurology approaches, which this is powerful stuff, and it's very non-invasive, it's very simple, and it's very, very effective. So if you don't need a knife and you don't need a drug, I mean, what are you going to do for this person, right? Well, functional neurology says, well, cranial nerve 1 causes you to smell, so let's have them smell out of the affected side, right? So we would have them start to stimulate smell. We would have them start to stimulate the movement of their eyes in different angles, and using muscle testing even on top of that if you want to apply. I like the combination. You can actually find, oh, if they look up and to the right, they're fine. They look up and to the left, there's weakness. Beautiful, let's treat that. And I'll talk about what that looks like next. Then you stimulate sensation, you know, and you could use little pinching. You could use hot and cold. You can use vibration, right? There's all different types because you're affecting what could be called Meissner's corpuscles or Pacinian corpuscles or C fibers, right? These are all different neurological parts that a lot of people don't know about. But I want to give people the awareness, because once you have awareness, you can make a better informed choice, because that's where I would be. I wouldn't just be in there talking to somebody, you know, like, gosh, I hope it gets better, you know, here's why it's better, or, you know, why it's the problem. Let's fix the issue, right? So we go through. So you
actually had people with Bell's palsy
totally,
that you've been able to help?
Within a few treatments even.
Wow.
But I don't want to make this a Bell's palsy, let's, you know, come and see me, Bell's palsy. But just as an
example that people should know that there are solutions.
There's amazing things you can do. Just
because your conventional doctor has maybe told you that there's nothing you can do, you know, that there are other answers in the, you know, alternative, as we're often called. But, you know, getting out of the box a little bit, that people can know that there are solutions. You mentioned previously that you've worked with people with, you know, multiple sclerosis, you know, all kinds of conditions that the mainstream kind of says, like, oh, that's it, you have that, and here's your life, here's how we can help you manage your symptoms. But you're actually saying, no, there's actually things that we can do and help people with these things.
And we're not curing and diagnosing and preventing, you know, all of this stuff that the medical, you know, system is trying to keep the what's available from getting out. We just go through and we work to stimulate the areas of weakness. That's all we're doing. It's the same thing if I'm never treating MS, I'm never treating Parkinson's. We know, oh, the substantia nigra, it produces dopamine. What if we supported that organ? You know, what if we supported the weak systems of this person? And guess what? A lot of people really improve. Some really struggle because they've got other more serious things. But the purpose of this whole context is to say that we go through and facilitate sensory impulses to people, right? If people have had an injury to cranial nerve 8, which is the ocular motor nerve, is the ability to hear, we can stimulate information over here and upregulate or afferentate the opposite cortex, specifically the temporal lobe, which is responsible for smell and sound and, by the way, adrenal function. So, well, you'd say, well, how do we do that? Well, you can do sound, and you can do different tones or tuning forks, or, you know, this kind of sound versus, you know, snapping or tearing of paper. You can do that, but what I like to use on top of that, it's all about stacking. And there's a concept of neuro stacking, right? Is if you're using input and also sensation, right, along with different types of things like laser light. And the future of medicine is light and sound. I say it over and over. And because we're vibrational beings, you know, we're frequency. We can measure all of these frequencies. We can measure different frequency of light and say, oh, that's a microwave frequency. Oh, that's a Bluetooth field. Oh, this is a Wi-Fi. You know what I mean? So the future of understanding that, they're already doing so much of this, specifically in Europe, with light and sound, and even treating all types of really neat things. The medical community, they're way more open-minded and advanced, right? So utilizing laser therapy, these are cold lasers, right? They're non-heated, non-cutting light. They have governors on them, because if you took them off, they would actually cut or burn. That's what laser is used mostly in medicine, right? And thank goodness for that methodology, right? It makes, surgery so much better and less bleeding and recovery time. So using photonic light, which are called cold lasers, not hot lasers, using certain frequencies, what you're doing is you're stimulating the area with photonic light. And it would be like, if I were to put my hand on your shoulder over there, after I put my hand on your shoulder, after a while you'd probably forget about it. It's kind of like the socks on your feet. You just don't think about it, right? And that is because of the reticular activating system of the brain. And that reticular activating system allows you to interpret what's important at the moment, right? It's our communication, not me thinking about my socks that are orange or something, you know? Could you imagine? And that when things get out of balance, a lot of people can't function these. And that can be a lot what schizophrenia looks like, where you're taking in information from all over and it's overwhelming, right? So in a functional approach, if we're learning about this and aware of this, then we can learn that, wow, we can actually create balance. If this is out of balance, then we can work with it and see balance or tone start to respond. And I've had people that have responded with even 2 and 3 visits. Pretty amazing. And I'm amazed myself, because it's like really not me. I'm just using the wiring of your own natural body and putting photonic light in there. So if we put my hand on your shoulder, after a while you're going to forget about it. But if I'm doing this, like, hey, what's going on? You know, and I'm actually kind of changing the pulsation and I'm moving around, that's what light therapy does. Is so now we're adding another layer of neural stacking, right? So we're adding sound, we're adding touch, we're adding input, which is light, you know, and even music. And you can affect different parts of the brain using different types of music too, you know. You can use more nature sounds for right brain, or more mathematically precise sounds for left brain, like Mozart, right? They're very different. Right. So it's very important to recognize this. So once you understand that concept and understand your brain is a lot like a muscle, and you have a child that comes in that has an issue with their arm, or maybe they have an issue with attention, what you can do is actually upregulate or downregulate parts of the body using the end organ, which is the hands, or sensation, or the smell, or do you know what I'm saying? Vibration, cold and hot immersion, water, you know, type approaches. And so, for example, anxiety, to tie it back into that. Well, how could functional neurology be effective for something like anxiety? What we do is a very thorough background on the nutrition. We get a really awesome, amazing history. It's very important, like, what were you exposed to? What did you do? But then we actually go through and check motion of the eyes. We check different tests, like I showed on some of the other videos, called dysdiadochokinesia, finger to nose, finger to pen to nose, right? And what those tell us is, when I find areas that are not smoothly moving, or you can't touch these, you can't reach the goal of the test, then knowing the wiring of the brain, saying, okay, if they're missing over here, it means it's their left temporal lobe, right? Then we just stimulate left temporal lobe. And at this point, most patients' eyes are rolled in the back of their head, and it's way too much information. But what does left temporal lobe stimulation look like? Well, it looks like, you know, sending sensory information, and it looks like moving the body in a certain way. It looks like moving your eyes to a certain direction, you know. Very, very specific. And it's not really anything more than firing the pathway that's weak. And what you see is balance between the 2 hemispheres, because if you're in the gym working out one side of the body only, then you're going to be running in a circle when you start, you know, you just got this weird body. That'd be really bad, by the way. Well, you see this a lot in humanity and society today, because we are really born into a world that is very left brain. You know, it's about coloring in the lines, you know, filling out the scantrons, A, B, C, D, with a black and white paper, right? Black pen or black pencil, you know. And so we're very kind of linear, and okay, now after high school I'm going to college, and after college I get the job, and then I get the 2.5 kids, you know. And we're kind of in this box. So people are not really thought to be flamboyant and speak with, you know, fervence and color in their life. And so we really stimulate this this left cortex, this left brain, which is logical and linear and mathematical.
Right.
So people develop things, they're more at a propensity, it's not the only reason, by the way, but they're more at a propensity to develop obsessive compulsive disorders, anxiety, autism, you know, feeling like anxious. And the reason is the left brain is the gas pedal. It's the thing that makes your mind just go and go, and you know, you're thinking.
The racing thoughts, and can't shut it off and can't sleep.
So there's a way to calm that down. Now, that can be caused by an imbalance of your neurotransmitters. By the way, if you have a really overstimulated cortex on one side or the other, that can do it. You know, your blood sugar and blood chemistry can do that, right? However, in applying functional neurology on top of all the other approaches, nutritional, and, you know, different approaches like applied kinesiology and emotional and all of these things, you start to see really, really amazing things, because you're addressing every single system. You're addressing endocrine and structure and neurology and nutrition, you know, and emotion and all of those things. It's pretty amazing what begins to happen. So as I find somebody in the world, whether it's a child that's overstimulated, right, or a person that can't sleep, or a stressed out executive, what you find, now this is not everybody, I'm just trying to be general, a lot of society is left prefrontal cortex in the executive brain centers, right? They're in their logical mind. They can't really get into the feeling body. They can't really, right? And extreme cases of this can be autism or attention deficit, where they can't sit still. They're just kind of, you know, and they're actually have to do this. Like a person with extreme autism will actually perseverate and titubate, but perseverate on a pen, right? If you take that pen from them, they could kill you, you know, some of them, right? So the left brain, when it's overstimulated like that chronically, what will happen is there'll be imbalance in the brain. So we know that if this is overfiring, we want to now get this part of the brain to take over a little bit and strengthen it, right? We want to go to the gym, and if this arm's real strong, let's balance this side, right? So what can you do to make that other cortex work better? Well, you could start to do movement of your alpha motor neurons, right? Move muscles. And you can start to do sound and vibration. So the point is that you can begin to balance these with different neurological aspects. This could be balance board stuff and different types of motions. It's really involved. There's a whole lot to it. But just knowing that you can actually balance the hemispheres of the brain and the body is so amazing and so powerful, because when you start to get the body firing on all cylinders, and then you start bringing in these other adjuncts that we utilize in the practice, you really start to see major improvement. And this works for phobias. You know, I had a young man I treated here in town tell me the other day, you know, remember the last time you took me out and I couldn't walk barefoot? He had a sensory issue, and a lot of young people that have attention deficit and autism and these things, they have sensory issues. And we actually took him on a walk without his socks, and he was hating that. And by the end of it, doing neurology work and also working with his fear and emotions, it really came down for him believing that it's not safe, that the world's not safe, that things are sharp and dangerous, and that things can happen. And you start to make people realize this is just an irrational fear. There's very simple processes for this, and people really move through really quickly and powerfully. And that, I'm amazed myself, you know, and it's that there's a lot of practitioners in the United States particularly doing this now. It's available. A lot of them are not outspoken because they want to fly below the radar, because it feels dangerous and daunting, right? A lot of the options that are out there are suppressed because there's a very interesting vested interest in having a person that's struggling to go through without actually finding, like, oh, there's other things that we can incorporate. And you know, I am certainly not against, any type of medical establishment. Actually, I'm very pro for that. We just want to, as we've learned, we want to combine forces, just like the corpus callosum here, where we need to combine the forces, just like in the brain, right? That's how they communicate. Now we're not just working on one side. We need to combine, and some of the very best of the doctors out there are now the functional neurologists, and even the ones that are incorporating functional medicine, because it's just science. It's just pathways, It's just the basics of how the body is wired, all that electrical circuitry, you see when you open up an anatomy book. There's tremendous amount of information of the breakdown of like the science of it and the pathways. You can run and actually trace the line of what's called the dorsal column medial lemniscus and the pontomedullary reticulating activation. There are all these little wire systems that you may not have even ever heard about. They all run from different parts of the brain to the end organs. And if you have a doc that knows how to functionally work with that versus just a drug or a knife, you're going to see really cool results.
Well, I think that time and time again throughout this course, we've come back to this idea of balance, so balancing the kind of conventional approach with the more natural, holistic, functional approach, bringing balance to our brain through these different techniques, and just the main thing that I want to convey here is to empower people that there are solutions and to not give up and to reach out to a practitioner like yourself and know that there is light on the horizon, so to speak. It's not that you just have to live your whole life with these different symptoms, and that is something that we don't often get in the mainstream. And we don't get empowered to know that, hey, there's actually things you can do with the right knowledge and the right person that is helping guide you to that kind of individualized path for you. So I just really hope that people are feeling empowered by this information, and I want to thank you so much for being here and sharing all of this with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was nice to talk about it.
Definitely.
Give a little context.
Thank you so much for joining us today. You can refer to other videos in this course to learn some of these different neurological exercises and to see some of them in use with actual example patients. So I encourage you to visit the rest of the videos in this course, and I want to thank you so much for sharing this time with us, making this investment in yourself and in your health. We wish you the very best, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.